Okay, good evening, everyone. It's Human Services Committee time. It's Monday, November 7th, 2011. It's about 7:46 in the evening. Thank you for waiting. We had a long executive session, but I appreciate your patience. We have a quorum. Our first item is approval of the meeting minutes of October 3rd, 2011. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Are there any changes or corrections? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on to our items for consideration. What I'm going to do is go through the township bills, and then we'll have citizen comment, because we have a number of people here to speak on, especially the marijuana issue, and then one on the parkland. So let's approve the township bills. That's the Township of Evanston October monthly bills totaling $137,024.16. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? I had some questions on the township bills, but because there is a meeting in Springfield, they couldn't be here tonight. I'm going to hold those questions for the next meeting, but because of their general nature, it's not something that that we should hold up the vote on the bills for.
I can go to council.
Pardon me?
You can ask them at council.
Okay. Well, I want to talk to the township about them.
Yeah, they'll be at council.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Alderman Holmes.
No, I saw your email on that, and when it said of general nature, and then I was wondering, it's okay then to go ahead and pay the bills?
Yes.
So it's not about any particular
Right.
bill and payment of?
That's correct.
Okay, fine, not a problem.
Okay, so all those in favor of the township bills, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, now we've got a number of people who have been signed up for citizen comment. And 3 minutes, please. Madeline Ducree, Betty Esther. Larry, do you want to speak on the park after the marijuana? Do you want to be last one on the park? Okay. DeKel Fonda. The three of you would come up. Why are you here? Is that Madeline? I can't see. Mm-hmm. Okay. Madeline Ducree is coming up first. And is Betty Esther here?
Yes, she's back.
Saw her.
Okay. And then DeKel, you'll be third. Mm-hmm. If you'd state your name and address, please.
Good evening, everyone. Madeline Ducree, resident of Evanston. I believe many years ago that the war on drugs failed, and I still believe that. I believe substance abuse should be treated as a public health problem, not a crime. I believe in Chicago, in Evanston, and other cities and suburbs, punishment falls more on the colored people, black men, if you will, than any other nationality or race. Just as prohibition did not work with alcohol years ago, prohibition with marijuana haven't reduced the use nor the demand. We need laws on the books that will deal fairly and realistically with marijuana or any other drugs for that matter. I do not believe that Evanston should instill an ordinance about marijuana dealing with a large fine that will help us with our revenues and that will bind poor people financially. Otherwise, this ordinance will defeat the purpose. This ordinance, if passed, should be left up to this ordinance, if passed, should not be left up to any one officer to make certain decisions. It should be a law that deals with juveniles or adults and should be on the books. In closing, I would like the Human Services Committee to know that I did not like the idea of the trustees doing away with the Evanston Township program in early spring, and I definitely do not believe the city of Evanston should take over this program now. You will hear from us more later. Thank you.
Yeah, Betty, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Betty Esther. I stay at 2031 Church Street. The topic now that I'm speaking on several, but the first one is the ordinance. And I read the background information that it had in there, and it had a statement that the kids be getting arrested and then they can't get a job because then they have a criminal record and everything, so they can't get a job. I said, well, yeah, somebody will give them one, maybe, but they have a better chance. But every time they go to an employer that does drug testing and they tested positive, they definitely will not be hired. So how is this supposed to be deterrent someone? You're going to pay $500 for a violation that will go nowhere, or because they only get in the court system, according to this violation, if they got over 10 grams or 10 ounces or whatever, over 10. Long as they're under 10, it's like a parking violation. Is that what we're trying to tell the kids? You smoke marijuana, it's just like you getting a parking ticket. So unless it can have more punitive consequence to it, this is an ordinance that really should not be on Evanston book. If you're trying to help them and make it not so that they don't get arrested, they can get a job, then you have to legalize it. And if you're not ready to legalize it, you definitely don't want to pass an ordinance like this. Thank you.
My name is DeKel Fonda. I'm a 30-year resident of Evanston. With all due respect to my neighbor Betty, I want to urge you to pass this ordinance, although I do think that this is a piece of a much larger discussion. And I say that because I think we have a sort of an unofficial, as many cities do, stop and frisk policy in our city. And I think that as a result of that, we have a disproportionate number of young African American men who are stopped, frisked, and found with small amounts of marijuana, often under 10 grams. And they subsequently, as we know from the Reader article that came out in July, they go through the court system. The article that showed that Evanston has the fourth largest, highest number of marijuana arrests in the county were based on Cook County Circuit Court documents and documentation. So I supervised a group of students at Northeastern in 2009, and one of the students is here to speak to that research that they did to look at. This is what many of our children know in Evanston is that a lot of black kids are stopped and frisked, and they're found with small amounts of marijuana, and they end up in the judicial system, and then then it's often a downward spiral from there. This research shows, as Jersey Hosier will tell you, that this is what's happening here, and there are pockets, there are clusters in our city of where these young people are stopped. They broke it down with a FOIA request on race, gender, and age, and it is a large number of African American men that are the subject of this. So, if you pass the ordinance, at least at this point, until this discussion becomes a larger discussion in our city about that particular pattern, at least when those young people are stopped, they will not end up in the judicial system. They will be ticketed, and then they can be diverted, or they can, their parents and their families can have some discussion about this. So I urge you to give clear consideration to passing this and to broadening this discussion to what's really happening on the streets in Evanston, and to train in some training. Perhaps let's look at training. The YWCA is doing some wonderful conversations on race and community conversations about this issue. So thank you.
Okay, Jersey, are you going to speak? Yes, okay. And would you give us your address? Yeah, please.
Jersey Hosier. I'm a Northeastern Justice Scholar. Here just to really speak on behalf of the information and statistics that we gathered over a 16-month period. We collected data from FA FOIA spreadsheet pretty much. And basically, the information that was gathered, there were clusters of numbers of African American young males that were stopped, detained, arrested, fined, and in the areas, basically, the clusters were around the high school, Evanston Township High School, more specifically, and also around the border between Rogers Park and Howard on the Evanston side, so that street primarily. There were very few arrests in northwest Evanston, according to what was charted, plotted, and all of the data that was collected. And also there were no arrests for possession of marijuana on the Northwestern campus, which was ironic, considering that's a college campus, and I'm a recent graduate of Northeastern. I know that campus colleges are highly populated with marijuana. Also, to speak to that, black females were also targeted at higher rates than that of white females. The numbers are almost quadrupled in reference to African American males that are stopped, detained, arrested, and convicted of possession of marijuana in reference to white males. Also, white males simply just aren't targeted as often as African American males. And then in the article in July that was released by the Reader, the neighborhoods were Maywood, Cicero, Chicago, and then following the fourth was Evanston. All of the neighborhoods within Chicago were predominantly African American neighborhoods. The only two neighborhoods outside of African American communities that showed high arrests in the narcotic of marijuana was Logan Square, and the predominant race that was arrested and detained and charged with possession of marijuana was Latino. So that's basically the information that we collected in the 16-month period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's someone here representing the high school who just signed in with ETHS. Okay, great.
Good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
Good evening. First of all, let me say that I am not here to support.
Yes, could we have your name, please?
Oh, sure. Vernon Clark, Associate Principal for Educational Services, Evanston Township High School, 1600 Dodge Avenue. Let me first of all say that I'm not here to support nor take a position on the ordinance, but I am here to clarify what ETHS does and what we will continue to do. Our district does not have a position on the ordinance, but certainly we have representatives here who will certainly speak to why we will continue to keep marijuana out of our school and the effects of marijuana on the development of teenage brains. At ETHS, we do not criminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana and do not involve the police for small amounts. Students found with small amounts of marijuana in school are subject to school discipline. We only involve the police when we find large amounts of the drug, which seems to be congruent with the mayor's proposal. The ordinance would not require any change in our student enforcement policy. Here are the facts that are important to us in the school. Pot is an illegal drug. Schools model compliance with the law. Pot is only sold illegally. Drug dealers sell pot. Gangs get footholds in school through selling drugs. It is vital that we keep gang activity out of our school. Drug deals go bad, and we do not want drug activity or drug deals at ETHS or in the area surrounding ETHS. It will put all of our students at risk. Students who are high in school cannot learn. Students who are high in school can make risky and even dangerous decisions that endanger them and others. The developing teenage brain is affected by pot differently than the adult brain. In school, we will not have less serious consequences for pot, which is an illegal drug, than for alcohol infractions, which is illegal for underage drinkers. At school, it is important that we do not send mixed messages to our students, and we will continue to communicate to them to obey the law. We will continue to teach our students about the dangers of drug use and communicate that marijuana use is against school rules. We will continue to worry about the examples we know firsthand where marijuana has been a gateway drug for some of our students who have gone on to become addicted to much more deadly drugs. There are too many tragic stories that we could tell. We're sure you will, and our representatives will make lots of other good information to provide. Again, we have no position on the mayor's ordinance. We do not criminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana in school, which is much the same as the mayor's proposal. We will continue to prohibit drugs in school, continue to have clear consequences, continue to focus on drug education and prevention strategies, and we'll continue to make the actions that will keep our school drug-free and safe for everyone. And I will tell you that many of these are the comments of our superintendent, Dr. Eric Witherspoon. I will say that education is probably the best prevention and intervention medicine, and I would urge you, if you're going to vote in favor of this ordinance, that there be some type of drug education or some kind of instructional program for people who may have issues with drugs. And another thing, since I'm up here, it would be nice if someone at some point will take up the idea of issuing an ordinance law around the high school. I mean, a loitering ordinance around the high school.
I'm Jacqueline Loers. I'm the SAP coordinator at Evanston Township High School, filling in for Christina Cortese, who is on maternity leave. So just to reiterate a little bit, at ETHS, we do not criminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana, and we do not involve police for possession of small amounts either. These students that are found are subject to school discipline and treatment options. We have found that with increased use, grades decrease, and that most of our cases of violence in school do involve marijuana. Between the school year 2009 and 2011, 70 to 80% of our students that are involved in the Students Under the Influence program required more than educational support, which is a FACS class, and it consists of more than experimental abuse. They require continuous individual and group therapy, which is like level 1 IOP, intensive outpatient program, or residential treatment. And this year, almost 50% of our students in the Under the Influence program are freshman students. With no education or treatment options, these students will not be educated on their use and the possible effects on their future. These statistics illustrate the need for education and treatment options with marijuana use, and at ETHS, we will continue to prohibit drugs in school, continue to have consequences, and continue to focus on drug prevention and education. Thank you.
Alderman Holmes?
Either from the young lady or Mr. Clark, could you please define for me small amounts versus large amounts? What does high school, how do you measure that?
Good evening. My name is Sam Patino. I'm the safety director at the high school. It's a somewhat subjective determination. We kind of fall around the 10-gram limit or under. Really depends on the young person, the student we have in possession, and what his background has been, either in school or with the police department. We make a decision based on the tenets of the Juvenile Court Act, whether a student goes to the police department or not. But generally under 10 grams is the threshold we use also.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Quick question. Do you have any stats, a breakdown of how many kids are arrested each year and then, caught each year at the high school, and then how does that break down racially?
I don't have any stats with me, so I wouldn't want to.
On average?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Just looking at the stats from 2009 and 2010, the last year stats, we had about 85 students. We have the racial breakdown. I don't have it with me. I can get you that information for sure because we have it by grade, by race, by all of that. So I can get that information. But it was about 90 students last year, and we're already up to, I think it's like 35 this year, and we're not even halfway through the school year. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Maura Mooney, Richard Mosley Jr., Kate Mahoney, and Albert Gibbs.
Hi, I'm Maura Mooney. I'm the Coalition Coordinator for the Evanston Substance Abuse Prevention Council. We're located at 906 Davis Street. The Evanston Substance Abuse Prevention Council, or ESAPC, is a local coalition whose mission is to increase the health of Evanston youth by preventing alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use through community-level strategies. The ESAPC does acknowledge that this is a very concerning issue given Evanston's above-average marijuana use rates among youth and the continuing impact that marijuana use and its consequences has on youth and young adults. The presence of drugs and alcohol in our community certainly contributes to additional problems, including poor academic performance, unemployment, family instability, and violence. Reducing penalties for marijuana possession, however, does not simply impact the individual cited, but the greater community, especially in the long term, given that younger adolescents in particular are more likely to begin using if they view it as less risky and more socially acceptable. We believe that this is a complicated issue that requires a comprehensive solution, addressing individuals' barriers to success, whether that means education, employment, or any other opportunity. So, thank you.
My name is Richard Mosley Jr. I'm the pastor at Hemingway United Methodist Church, located at 933 Chicago Avenue. I'm also a board member of Coalition for the Homeless, as well as Interfaith Action of Evanston. I just want to say at the beginning that 1 year in Princeton costs $37,000. 1 year at New Jersey State Prison is $44,000. I want to encourage you to pass this ordinance. You may ask why. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. But if we make mistakes, we pick up ourselves and we start again. If you have a criminal record, you're 40 years old, and you made a mistake at 18, you cannot pick yourself up again. That record follows you for your lifetime. It prevents you from having opportunities that you normally would have if you had an opportunity to not be criminalized for small amounts of marijuana use. I believe that young men and women in the Coalition for the Homeless and Interfaith Action want to begin again, but it's difficult for them to begin when they cannot find a job because of something they've done in their past. Many of us have done things in our past. We've had family members, supportive community workers that enable us to move forward. With this on their record, they cannot move forward. And so as a pastor who understands that we all make mistakes and to understand that sometimes we do need assistance in overcoming barriers that enable us to move forward, I will encourage you to pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kate Mahoney. I live at 2538 Grosse Pointe Road in Evanston. And I am here to ask us to all slow down a little bit. I really applaud the mayor's commitment to helping young people find jobs and her concern about, I think, the current situation. And we had a really positive meeting where we were able to talk about some potential additions to looking at this in terms of looking at possible alternatives to referrals for assessments for young people, some of the things that some of our neighboring communities do. So the village of Skokie for a very long time has referred young people for assessments as opposed to just ticketing them and wanting to keep them out of a traditional ordinance court, which makes something like this feel like, oh, I forgot to put enough money in the meter. It's a little bit of a different issue, and wanting to send that. And the village of Wilmette also sends young people for assessments and intervention and treatment when needed. So we're a little concerned about the unintended consequences of what I think is a really good goal, which is trying to help young people get jobs. A couple of key things I think in terms of looking at is when we look at people who get ordinance tickets, I'm not sure we're going to get then the data that we're really interested in terms of knowing race, gender, ages on ordinance tickets. So if we're really trying to look at patterns in our community, I'm not sure we would get that with ordinance tickets. Perhaps that could be modified. I'm not sure if the plan would be that parents would be notified if a juvenile gets an ordinance ticket. Right now, I think if you get a parking ticket, I don't think your parents are notified. You can dash over here and pay it or not, and I'm not sure how that works. So I'd want to know that issue. And what we're looking when we see people who keep being charged with possession. The other reality is we need to look at the fact that the root of right now, the supply chain of all of the illicit drugs, including marijuana, really, in our country, and if you talk to people in the DEA, they'll make this really clear, really comes through the gang structure. And so I'm concerned that actually with this message, when there's decreased risk, we might end up with increased use, both by adolescents and adults, which could actually strengthen the foothold of some of the gangs in the Evanston and surrounding areas and actually work exactly against the public safety concerns that, again, I think you as council members and the mayor is concerned about. Finally, I just really want to talk about the way that people use marijuana. And it was interesting to see. I think the mayor and I had similar ideas because not everybody knows what 10 grams looks like. So this is 10 grams of oregano bought at the Spice House on Central Street on Friday. And many young people in particular who are Caucasian, when they smoke marijuana, smoke it in rolling papers rolled up as joints or in pipes. But many African American young people smoke their marijuana in blunts. And blunts are cigars where people have taken out the tobacco and then refilled it with marijuana. It comes from a particular brand originally of cigars called Philly Blunts, but it's become a generic term much the way we use Kleenex. And if you look at today, on my way over, I stopped at the little store near Gigio's that sells cigars. And if you were to look in here, this takes up more than 10 grams to fill this. So you could actually, with the goal of trying to work on racist issues, end up potentially that if you're Caucasian and you smoke joints or you smoke bowls or you smoke in a pipe, you'll have less than 10 grams. And if you're an African American and your culture is that you smoke blunts, that you would have more than 10 grams and by definition then fall under the misdemeanor. So I'm concerned there's a potential unintended consequence that young people would really, we'd have a greater division. So again, my message from the beginning is if we could slow down, stop and talk a little bit more about what the goals are, what our plans are, and see what we can do as a community to achieve our goals of helping young people get jobs, helping young people keep jobs, and so that they're not having problems related to, if they are using marijuana, passing not only pre-employment drug tests, but random drug tests and issues related to performance that can come with someone who's a regular marijuana smoker, and figure out what our goals are as a community and then what ordinance changes might help achieve that. So thank you so much. And again, I want to thank the mayor for your initiative in getting this conversation started and really looking at your commitment to trying to help with the employment issue with the, not only teens, but really young adults who I think are really struggling. And I think that commitment is something we really need to take a look at. So thank you.
Kate, I believe Alderman Braithwaite.
I just have a question for the speaker. And I've known you for so many years in the community and have a deep respect for the work that you've done for those many years. And I agree with some of the statements that you made, but I have a real difficult time sitting here with that last analogy that you just made with the reference to the volume and race. And maybe if you can come back to the committee or just email the chair with some data to support that.
In terms of the way people tend to smoke?
Yeah,
Or-
That would be helpful.
So what I can do is look from our treatment perspective in
Okay.
terms of how teenagers, and again, in particular,
Right.
describe their use. And we could probably look at a year's worth of data
That would be helpful.
and their reported use.
Maybe come back and make a report.
Absolutely.
Okay, I
Great.
appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Albert Gibbs, and then Liz Tisdall.
Good evening. My name is Albert Gibbs. I am a resident of Evanston. I actually didn't have in mind to speak. I was coming to listen. But while I've been listening, I was really wondering, is this really the answer to what you say is a problem? Is this really an answer? I was a drug addict. I started off smoking marijuana at 14. I graduated to more serious drugs, more serious drugs. I've done a lot of good things, done some bad things. Should I have blamed them on the drugs? Anyone that knows me will tell you I don't. I've always known what I'm doing, whether I'm drug-induced or alcoholic. I knew I was doing something wrong. Is this ordinance supposed to help these children not do something wrong? Is it really making sense? So I jotted a couple of things down. I said, well, it sounds to me like so many different things are being grabbed at here. Maybe they're valid, maybe they're justified, maybe not. But I'm thinking, beyond a shadow of a doubt, before you claim anything, you need to discuss this more. You need to discuss this more. Not only do you need to discuss this more, but I'm hearing some things that says this is the unfair usage of the way some kids are done, unfair regulation, or even uneven-handed enforcement of drug laws, or just maybe laws in general. Well, that seems to be more of a problem, more so than this ordinance would be able to resolve. I recently recalled something in the past where a man was just executed. It appears to be a crime. It starts to reveal itself to be something more and more this man did not do. But yet Supreme Court and other jurisdictions says, well, we're standing on what we're standing on. Because a person may end up with a record of some sort because of a minor infraction in the law does not make that person no more good for life. None of us can sit here and act like this, act like we're above or we're better than anything or anyone. We're not going about this the right way. I'm trying to say this. How much or how little of this drug that someone has is really not the issue. It's not the issue at all. All of that comes from in the home. It comes from the problems that the child has. We know we have drug addicts. We know we have drug dealers. They're a problem. We have alcoholics. They're a problem. If we are to be a loving and caring community and concern people for one another, I don't know what your religious affiliation is. I'm not trying to insult anyone, but I believe in prayer. I prayed to have the drugs removed from me. Call me foolish if you want to, but God delivered me from drugs. I didn't have to go to a rehab. I wanted to get rid of it bad enough that I prayed. And when I walked out of my house, it seemed like every drug dealer nearby said, come here, hey, come here, come here. And I had to think, well, how can I deal with this? You know what I did? I said, I tell you what, I want some of your drugs so bad, but I got to go do this first. And when I go do this, and I'll take care of that, I'll come back and I'll buy all the drugs you got. That was my lie to get away from the man at the moment. It helped. I'm not saying it's going to help these kids, and I'm not saying this ordinance is. For whatever reasons you want to put to it, don't fool yourself. Talk about this more. Discuss this more.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
Elizabeth Tisdall, 2 Martha Lane. The reason I got into this was at the Safe Summer Summit, we were trying to decide what would help the 18 to 25-year-olds who were not being helped by all the recreation programs and the wonderful things we did during the summer for everyone else. And Alderman Holmes told me, and many of the 18 to 25-year-olds told me, that what they want is jobs. And that is exactly what I would want them to want. So there were 2 reasons that they could not get jobs. Well, 3. One is the lousy economy, which I can't do anything about. Another was training, and we are meeting with Oakton and trying to get Oakton to bring more classes here. But the 3rd reason was that they had records. And if you have a record, you cannot get a job. In our own hiring at the city, there are forms you fill out for some jobs that say, have you ever used alcohol, used marijuana? And if you say you have, that's fine. But if you say you've been caught with marijuana and you have a record, that's not fine, and you don't get the job, which is relatively hypocritical, I believe. So I looked at ordinances and other cities that have ordinances that do not make you a criminal if you use 10 ounces or less of marijuana, which is a very small amount. If we passed this ordinance, we would have more of our young people who could get jobs. We would also, it turns out, I've found out from studying it, the police spend much more time arresting someone than they do ticketing them. So we would have police spending more time on the street dealing with more serious criminals. We would save taxpayers money on court costs. And the fines that worry people could be paid in 2 ways. 3. 1, you could pay the money. 2, you could go to drug counseling, or 3, you could go to community service. And we're working with the Moran Center to try to figure out how that would be run at no cost to the city, because I am well aware we have no money. I have a youth council who meets with me at Evanston High School, and in discussing this with them, they had another reason that this was a good idea. They said it would improve ETHS students' relationship with the Evanston Police Department. From the literature, Kate, you will be happy to know, I'm sure, that it says that the argument that this leads to increased marijuana use has been disproved by a few studies. E-Single's Impact of Marijuana Decriminalization, an update from the Journal of Public Health, is one you might want to read. But there are several studies which say that this does not increase marijuana use. Larry Suffredin, I asked him about this since he has some experience, because the county board has a similar ordinance for the unincorporated parts of Cook County. He says Cook County has passed a similar ordinance that has given the sheriff's office greater flexibility in charging. This saves the county money and reduced jail and processing time. It also gives offenders a chance to straighten their lives out. I know Evanston will experience the same savings of lives and money. So to the argument that we should slow everything down, I would say that we know that what we are doing now is not good for the young people in our community. We know that having records stops them from getting jobs. We know that we are not stopping their marijuana use with our current laws. So I would say we definitely should not slow down, that you should recommend that this be approved by the council, and that young people's lives are at stake. So please, let's act. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry, let's wait for you when we get to the issue. Okay. Okay, so this is proposed ordinance 92-0-11, amending certain provisions of Title 8, Chapter 16 of the Evanston Municipal Code entitled Marijuana. Alderman Grover.
To get the discussion going.
We have to have a motion to approve.
That's what I'm doing.
Fine.
To get the discussion going, I move that we recommend to the City Council adoption of Ordinance 92-0-11, and I may have amendments as part of this discussion.
I would second that.
Okay, we'll open it for discussion. Who wants to go first?
Sure. I had a couple questions about how we right now ticket for violations of the existing ordinance. Is administrative adjudication an option now for any resident, regardless of age, who is caught with fewer than 10 grams of marijuana? Or do all those cases go to arrest and then to Cook County, to Old Orchard?
Who wants to answer that? Chief, would you like to answer that question?
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the council. We do have an option at this point in time where some cases are taken to administrative adjudication and some go to Skokie Court.
And thank you, Chief. Do we have an idea of how many cases we send to administrative adjudication in a year for possession of less than 10 grams? Do we have data on that from our police department?
Oh, we do. I'm searching for it now. In fiscal year 10, there were 98 citations issued for cannabis possession. So far, year to date in FY11, there have been 76 citations issued. And when we say citations issued, those cases have gone to administrative adjudication rather than Cook County.
And do we have the numbers for the cases that we send to Cook County? Is it broken down by more than 10 grams or fewer than 10 grams possession?
I don't have them broken down that way. Although let me see, 144 total cannabis arrests, 17 of those were for more than 30 grams, 127 were less than 30 grams, and 50 of those for 10 grams or under in a city ordinance, and 8 of those were juvenile 10 grams or under in a city ordinance. The 30 grams is significant because under state statute, the 30 grams is the break-off where it becomes felony eligible. To be candid, I've been a policeman since 1974. The last person I recall getting arrested for a felony for 30 grams of marijuana occurred in 1975. It's not an option that's utilized.
While the Chief is there, to add on to what Alderman Grover was asking in the beginning, Chief, can you tell me, similar to what I asked Mr. Patino from the high school, how do you decide whether you're going to do the citation or send them on to the county?
There's several factors, and one of the complicating ones for juveniles is we are not the sole decision maker. We go through a juvenile state's attorney who makes a decision whether things are referred to court or not. Let me just tell you a quick story about some events this afternoon. We responded to a man with a gun call. 4 juveniles were taken into custody. As we worked our way through that case, it became clear that they were involved in several other inappropriate activities. At the end of the day, we wound up clearing the robbery of the Northwestern student from over the weekend with a cell phone, cleared a burglary, and a criminal damage to property. Of those 4 individuals, one's going to the Audi home, one's being charged and released to his parents, one's being charged with a criminal damage only and released to his parents, and the 4th individual is being released without charges. So as we work through these matters, it's very individualized decision making, and that individualized decision making is based on the history of the individual, the circumstances we're involved in. Are there any other charges pending with this decision? So there's a myriad of factors that play into how is this charged. And so on a case-by-case basis, I can answer it, but there's no template that I can overlay. Everybody is treated this way for this offense.
Okay. So that if you had, let's say that somebody's riding on the street on their bike, as we know they do, and they pass the corner and they pass a packet to someone else. So one is the buyer, one is the seller. It's less than 10 grams, then would they both be ticketed? Or if they were observed by the police?
If we could prove that case, we'd certainly roll up one for the sale, which is substantially higher penalties and charges. And to be as candid as I can, one of the first offers we'd make to the buyer is, if you tell us what you were doing, you'll get this. You'll get a lower charge because we want to get the seller, not the user. And so we'll have that conversation and see what happens. And that too will drive what the level of charging is for an individual. Did they cooperate or didn't they?
Okay, but in terms of ticketing, we could say you're going to get a fine of, one would be 50 and the other one could be 500. I'm just looking at the scale from 1 to... And I don't mean, I'm just trying to get a feel for it in terms of one being more serious in terms of the seller.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And one being, the receiver. So we could just, in my head, I'm saying, okay, so the $50 fine could be here and the $500 fine would be the other.
Absolutely. But in that scenario, the police department doesn't get to pick the fine. That's up to the administrative.
I understand. I understand.
I know you do, but I want to make sure the audience is staying up with us. We've been down this road a couple times.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Chief. 10 grams. 10 grams indicates somebody in possession of 10 grams of marijuana suggests that they are a user, not a dealer. 10 grams is where other municipalities draw the line, those that have decriminalized possession of small amounts.
I think that's an individualized decision. I think also it's tied to statute. There, I think 2.5 to 10 is the lowest misdemeanor, and so that's where everybody's has traditionally drawn the line. And you can make the argument 10 is for personal consumption. You're not a major distributor of cannabis if you only have 10 grams, or you're not a major distributor of cannabis at that time. So that's one of the selections of that particular amount.
And to follow up a point that Ms. Mahoney made about whether a juvenile who was ticketed for possession of fewer than 10 grams, whether the parents would be notified. Would parents be notified in that situation, or if it goes to administrative adjudication, could that juvenile handle it on her own?
The trigger for parental notification is the police department taking custody of the child or juvenile. I think in this scenario that we're walking through, if they are detained long enough for us to write the citation, it's my belief that they are in our custody and we have to notify the parent. And so I think that I know others would argue a different interpretation of that, but as someone responsible for the conduct of law enforcement officers in the city of Evanston, it would be my personal preference that the officers notify the parents of what they're doing. It is going to be much easier to explain our conduct and also have the parents in the loop on what we're doing. And because I don't want to get into a debate about you're home late, well, the police stopped me. We're just better off telling mom and dad or the guardian they were with us and this is why.
I want to follow up on that as well. In terms of, and following up on what Ms. Mahoney said, in terms of, I think it was a ticket, and like if you get a ticket on your car or what have you, I've been thinking about that ever since you said it, because I think you don't find many juveniles under 17 that would be a owner of a car, number one. So that would have to be in the parent's name. And I'm trying to figure out why the parents wouldn't know, even about those tickets. So I'm really happy to hear you say, Chief, that if they're in your possession long enough, that parents would have to be told. And I would think that would be the same thing on, of course, a ticket is usually left on your car if you're just getting a parking ticket. And I'm not equating this with, I hear people comparing, but I don't equate it with a parking ticket. But if you're getting a ticket for speeding or something like that, you got to show up to court. And if you're under 17, usually there's a parent. I know when I come to administrative adjudication to listen to some of the cases, there's usually a parent or someone or a lawyer with them in the administrative adjudication court under 17.
Alderman, if I may, that I would suggest that one of the cases where the Evanston Police Department would not notify a parent is we were just writing a speeding ticket. I think that's something that can go along. But the trigger for this is the custody or the temporary detention of the juvenile. We're responsible for them because they've had this substance on them. We've detained them for a while. They're in our custody, and frankly, we're just better off making the notifications. There'll be less confusion down the road.
And I didn't mean to imply that you would do it on a speeding ticket. I understand that. But I'm saying when they get to administrative adjudication court, right. I mean, they're not in, usually, I don't think, they're in possession of the car. The car is not theirs. Usually. There may be some exceptions to that. But I think that there's some parental involvement that has to happen with that. I'll check it out, but I believe I'm right on that.
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite and then Alderman Tandem.
Yeah, and Chief, I think you answered this question. So moving forward, if we were to pass this ordinance, any teen or adult picked up or spotted for possession of marijuana, they would be detained versus arrested.
At a minimum, we're going to have to hang on to them while we're writing the ticket. Now,
okay.
Even in the current system we have now, we've brought individuals to the station, and as we sort something out, we could charge a lesser amount, even though they've been detained, brought into custody, held at the station for a while we're deciding what to do. I could still see that scenario unfolding where it started off this way, but we wound up this way. That happens with some frequency.
And then, so my follow-up question would be, and if we did change this ordinance, do you think that there would be a change of behavior on the streets? We heard, someone just recently shared that there would be an increase of gang activity. Any type of trend that you are aware of nationally that by supporting this ordinance we would have to have any fear, or would the public be at any risk?
I'm unaware of any national trend. I'm unaware of any further cause for fear. I'm much more focused on the pragmatic nuts and bolts of this, about the notification of parents, right, and also the consequences for if the city of Evanston elects to make this policy decision and provide young people with this option, are there consequences for not following through? One of the things that I had to look into in preparation for tonight's comments was a review of the current pay rate on the cannabis tickets that we're currently issuing. Last year we collected about 34% of those tickets. This year we're collecting about 33% of those tickets. And so my thought is the council needs to be aware of that in their decision-making process and decide what's the follow-on action, if any. And frankly, I think another one of the evening's topics, I became aware of this and wouldn't have not asked the question but for our recent discussions on dangerous dogs, when it became clear that there were a sizable number of offenders that were ignoring the citations. I think we have a similar situation replicated with this, where if we're gonna go down this road, a decision is made what to do about non-compliance.
Alderman Tandem.
Thank you. First question is, how easy is it to determine, just from looking, if someone is in possession of 10 ounces or less? Is that I had no idea until Ms. Mahoney held up the bag. Is it kind of a standard that
visual estimates are not accurate enough for what we do. We'll scale it. At some point we'll weigh it, and unless it's such a minor amount that we know we're not going to break the 10. Interestingly, if you are a sophisticated purchaser of this commodity, you will want a bag that looks more like Her Honor's and Kate's than other bags you'll see on the street. So if there's a lot of stems, you're not getting enough stuff, although the 10 ounces looks way bigger. And so that's why we default to using scales rather than a visual estimate.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question. I've gotten a number of emails from moms who are concerned about what this says to their younger teenagers. And could someone from the high school just address that? I'm not so concerned about the 18 to 25-year-olds. They're adults. I mean, they really are legally adults. But what does this say to the 10 to 16, 17-year-olds? Could someone from the high school just address that, or anyone who?
Well, I was going to say,
You were chatting. Okay. Well, that's nice.
Sorry.
Sure.
And I think also the high school already told us, because if they already told us in terms of if they already now, and I think that's what made my vote
this
tonight.
Is still illegal. I'm sorry, Alderman Holmes.
It's still, I understand it's still illegal, but I'm just simply saying the high school already now, if it's a small amount, and that's why I asked to define it for me. In terms of that, they make those decisions there. So what kind of message is that giving to the kids that are in the high school who may have possession of a small amount, and they don't,
I think the difference is that that's the high school, and we're talking larger community police department.
I understand that, but we're talking, all of our kids are going to be fed right into the high school, and I understand we're talking junior high school, and because you said age 10, so we're even talking elementary school. However, I think that if we are looking at the larger amount, and I think the young man that they did the study for the 16 months talked about the two pockets around the high school and in the Rogers Park area, the Howard Rogers Park area. If we look at that in terms of looking at the pockets of where this might be happening, and we certainly know that the high school in particular is not an all African American or Latino school, but the numbers are higher on that end rather than what's happening. I'm real curious to get the figures back from the high school in terms of how it's broken down racially, to look at and see how that feels and what that looks like. So I don't think that our message is that it's okay to go and get high or go and get involved with marijuana. That happens, and I think Mr. Gibbs said it best, that starts in the home. This is not going to do anything, this ordinance will not do anything to deter someone who wants to start smoking marijuana to stop. I mean, we just know that. This is not what it's for at all.
Well, I think the emails that were sent were more of the sort. Well, the city now says it's okay. So how do I as a parent handle this in conversations with my child? I didn't want you to sit down. Can you just address that?
I'm sorry. Could you please restate what you're asking me?
Sure. I got a number of emails from moms who are concerned about if we adopt this ordinance, what it's going to say to the children about, are we then saying it's okay for you to have under 10 grams of marijuana?
Let me be very emphatic. ETHS is saying that smoking marijuana is illegal. We're not bending on that message. That is a message that we will continuously communicate to our students. We spell it out in our pilot. We talk to them in small groups and large groups. Our deans are in the cafeterias reiterating these things all the time. There will be consequences for anyone who is under the influence and possession of marijuana at Evanston Township High School. We're not bending. Drugs are illegal, and we're not going to have them in our school. However, at the same time, we want to educate our young people about the use of drugs. And therefore, when students are given consequences, we try to minimize those consequences by encouraging our young people to take advantage of our students under the influence substance abuse program, where they can get some education, and we try to get the parents to take part in that education as well. But be it understood, we're not bending. We're not going to tolerate it under any circumstances.
And the children are aware of this.
And the children are aware of this.
Every day.
Every day.
Okay. Alderman Grover and then Alderman Braithwaite.
Alderman Fisk, I can tell you can't even use the girls' bathroom at Evanston Township High School without getting the message that drug use is illegal and wrong, and you will be punished if caught. You can't sit on a toilet without seeing the message right in front of you. And clearly the Evanston police are comfortable with Evanston Township High School's approach, disciplinary approach, coupled with the educational programming as being effective to that target group, to its students. And it sounds like the proposed ordinance would align the city's approach with the high schools in a way that makes good sense to me. I'd like to, I know we want to discuss this more, but I just want to put it out that I'd like to send this to council for discussion before the full council. And what I'm going to suggest that we add to the proposed ordinance, however, is something that adds to the penalty provisions of it that accommodates, as part of the penalty provision, an additional option for our administrative adjudicator to impose, which would be an option for drug counseling, intervention, or treatment and/or community service, similar to the high school's approach for dealing with possession of minor amounts of marijuana. Right now, the penalty provisions are simply the fines of $50 to $500, and it sounds like we have some discretion as to how much of a fine we impose. But I'd like to give our hearing officers the option of also sending a violator to drug counseling or to community service, and if we have collaboration with the Moran Center to help us with monitoring community service and drug treatment compliance, then perhaps the cost to the city will be quite minimal. And we will couple then the financial penalty with actual education, which I think the high school has found is effective for a lot of its violators.
I think that's a good amendment. And I would certainly second that in terms of, I think it should say and or. Not,
right. I don't want to prescribe because it's pretty clear that individual violators are individuals, and what works for one won't work for the other. But give our hearing officers the option to decide. Is it drug treatment in this case? Is it community service that's going to make a difference with this violator, whether it's in the 18 to 25 category or a high school age student?
Right.
Okay,
so I'd like to, we can discuss that perhaps, but I'd like to amend it to include that and then send it to council with that amendment.
Okay, let's let Alderman Braithwaite, because he had a comment first, and then let's go back.
Yeah, and I'm willing to support that also, Alderman Grover. And just to the folks that are here, I just want to quickly say that I appreciate this conversation, and you know, as a parent, I definitely do not feel that we're communicating that it's okay to smoke marijuana. I don't think anyone up here is saying that it's okay to smoke marijuana. I'd like to thank the mayor for taking such a bold position in actually opening up opportunities for not just black but white, all youth here in town. I'd like to thank the staff from ETHS for coming and stating your position on the issue as well as the residents that took the time out of their schedules to come and speak on the issue. I am in support of the ordinance. I'll just say that right now. I think we could, and someone mentioned it, that this is a much larger conversation, the perception versus the reality, looking at the drug use and the number of arrests, and I think that should take place at another time. But for tonight, and the opportunity to pass this ordinance, I think we should do it, and I think we should send it to council. And I don't know if we can just call the question right now.
Well, I don't think we need to call a question. I think Alderman Grover has made an amendment, which I've seconded, so I'd like for us to move on that first and then go ahead and move it to take it.
The first thing before we finish our discussion and go to back to Alderman Grover is that District 65 was invited to attend tonight and
decline.
And is anyone from District 65? Did you want to comment? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Did we go through the whole speakers?
Okay. Jim, if you could state your name and school.
Jim McCollum, principal at Shute Middle School. As you were discussing the email that came from parents that you were concerned about, I guess from my vantage point, I would certainly not feel that the city is giving the green light to the use of in any way, and that my response to that would be that parents need to really, along with the school, reiterate to their kids what's right, what's wrong in terms of education. I would echo what the high school says in terms of how we try to educate kids about the decisions they make, and obviously at a young age as drugs and alcohol begin to be discussed more at the 5th grade and at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level. But it's all about being educated at that point. And for parents to think that an ordinance that the city has in play is going to kind of influence that the kids think that's okay, I think that goes right back into the home with the message that the parents are sending to those kids.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here tonight who wants to speak on this issue? Okay, I'll turn it back to Alderman Grover then.
So I think I'd be proposing an amendment to Section 8-16-3. If you have your packet materials, I got it on page 38. 8-16-3, possession of less than 10 grams, would really be fewer than 10 grams, administrative adjudication, penalties, or disposition. And I'm thinking it's probably subparagraph B, but I think I want to defer to our law department as to precise wording and send it up to council with an amendment, but without the precise wording, because frankly, I can't write on the fly. So we would leave it to Ms. Zaganis here to pull something together for us by the time it got to council. And I understand it won't go to council until the end of November. Mm-hmm. So we have time to collect the data from the high school, more information from our police department, and put it all together in a nice package when it goes to council. So it would be subparagraph B, which refers to imposition of a fine not less than $50 nor more than $500 for each violation, and additional option for drug counseling, intervention, treatment, and/or community service. So I think we keep the fine, but there's an option of also adding community service and/or drug counseling, substance abuse, treatment, counseling, education.
Okay. Do we have a second to the amendment? Okay. So all in favor of the ordinance as amended, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay, we're sending that to council then.
So we need to vote to send it. What? We need to vote to send it on, Judy. I would.
Okay, we have to
I would
vote.
move to.
Okay.
I would move to move ordinance. Now I can't pick the number out.
Yeah, I think Jane moved it already.
-0-11 onto council. Well, yeah, but then you redid the other one, so we might as well redo this
Okay.
as well.
All right. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, yes, yes. Okay. All right, moving along. If we could clear the room, that would be helpful. We're going on to H3, Proposed Ordinance 56011, enacting a new subsection 1-17-4-3 of the City Code to require a replacement of sold or leased parkland. We have one person signed up to speak on citizen comment, and that's Larry Raffle. That's it. Alderman Braithwaite, where are you?
Politicking is always.
He's going to the restroom.
We need you. We need you here. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Raffle, thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, all. My name is Larry Raffle. I am a resident of Evanston at 3509 Central Street, and I am speaking on behalf of the Park and Recreation Board on the matter of the sale of parkland. I want to thank you for allowing us to come before you, and I just want to provide a little bit of background on this particular issue. I know we came before you back in July. It was a little bit confusing at the time. We've gone back and kind of clarified the language as well as kind of the outline, the summary of why we're presenting this proposed amendment to the ordinance. As you know, most parkland and open space throughout Illinois is owned and maintained by park districts or forest preserve district, conservation districts, Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And Evanston's a little bit different to it being a department of the city. So our requirements for the sale of land are different. Park districts have a very, very strict state ordinance as to how they can dispose of land. Anything over 3 acres must go to referendum. Anything under than 3 acres must be replaced by suitable land, and that's kind of where we're at right here. We're not taking it to the extreme, but we do feel that the parkland is valuable, and we should at least try to take the good parts out of the state code for park districts and apply it to the city of Evanston. The existing ordinance, as you have right now, we're not proposing any changes to that language. What we're proposing is an amendment to that language to just address parkland. So we want to differentiate open space from, say, a building that the city may own or a vacant lot the city may own. Because one of the things, frankly, with open space is once you sell it and it's gone, it's gone. It's not coming back, particularly in a built environment like Evanston. When you lose open space, you've lost it forever. And that's one of the issues with selling land when you don't require the replacement of that open space. And in proposing this type of addition to the ordinance, the park board is looking forward. We're proposing this now while we still have the open space we do have, because the implications are, in addition to losing open space once it's gone, it also affects your ability to obtain funding, to obtain grants. A good example is last week staff was down in Springfield interviewing for an OSLAD grant, an open space land acquisition and development grant from the state. Now the state looks at things like your ratio of open space to 1,000 residents, and as you sell parkland and that number comes down and down and down, your ability to get grants, particularly through the OSLAD program, is diminished, and that is, I believe, where a lot of our funding comes from, or our grants come from. So over time, as we lose open space, our ability to fund these projects also decreases. So what we're looking at in terms of our proposition here is simply adding a subsection to the existing ordinance of the sale or the lease of real property, which basically is saying that should the council decide to sell land designated as a park use, which means it's zoned as park or open space, we simply require that that land be replaced with a similar in size area that's also suitable for park use. And we're asking that the City Council allow the Park and Recreation Board to make a recommendation based on our comprehensive master plan and the comments that we've received from the public as to what would be a suitable piece of property. So all we're doing really is just asking that parkland and open space be looked at differently when selling property than city-owned, other city-owned property.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, any discussion? Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, you had Right. You had your 3 minutes, and you said you were talking on various issues. Did you want to speak briefly to this?
I'll defer
Okay.
to Ms. Esper.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Yeah. I read what the ordinance and everything, and to me it made a lot of sense because then it brought to me home in the West Evanston master plan. That plan is being drawn, and what it's looking at is a park to be lost. And so we looked at there's another park that has play equipment that kids could go to. Right now, you have open space, which the school district owns, which is Fleetwood. But there is no park. There is a park on Ashland in the, is it 15 or 1600 block? It's in the 1700 block of Ashland. So that means the kids north of Emerson has to cross the street. We do have Family Focus that has a park, but that's not city-owned property. So they have to go, and then you're going to be putting in a street that kids have to cross that could usually run out of their backyard to the park or down the street, don't have to cross a busy street. Now you're talking about developing an area that you're putting a street that kids will have to cross just to get to Family Focus to play in a congested area. So when I saw this, I'm saying, gee, that's great. So now we can decide where to put a park over there, or if we really should be selling that park anyway. And then it dawned on me, well, this might not get passed because that development right now is on the fast track. So can we keep that park? We should be able to keep the park. I know there is talking about putting a park that's supposed to be in the middle of that development, that kids cross the street. The part that is being planned now, they're talking about putting a garden, community garden, but it's in kind of like, would be like of a cul-de-sac, so it's not really community friendly. So, you know, we want to keep our park so everybody has a chance to use it. And that park once where it just got upgraded, new play equipment and things, and it is being used by the community from the kids that still now live on Jackson. But I support what they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Alderman Grover.
Thank you. I have a couple questions about this. Mr. Gaynor and I talked about it today and sometime last week, and Doug, questions just keep occurring to me. First, do we have an inventory of Evanston's park-designated land that we could look at to see exactly what the realm of the possibilities are for the loss of parkland, what we should be protecting for sale, and then I think the problem I had back in July and now is still probably just goes to the language of this ordinance, and that would be that it's not clear that the acquisition of property is intended to be part of the same transaction in which the city loses parkland. It might make more sense for the first paragraph to read, as part of a transaction to sell city-owned real property and or facilities designated for park use, the city shall also acquire, or something like that. Reading more too, through that provision, the creation of a Parks and Recreation Fund to keep the profits of those sales. Maybe we should talk about that too, whether it should go into a general fund or go into a specific Parks and Recreation Fund. And then Mr. Gaynor and I talked about a couple hypotheticals, really just hypotheticals. We have park facilities that are on park property, such as the Dawes Park Lagoon Building or the James Park Field House, maybe even the Harley Clark Mansion, that are city-owned facilities on parkland that perhaps have a higher and better use, that could be used at James Park, the Field House, for a larger concession facility or something. And by leasing it out, do we also need to acquire property as part of that exchange? Or if we decide to, on a disposition of the Harley Clark Mansion, depending upon what its status is, would that require us to acquire comparable or equal or greater in area property for the purposes of park? I'm just having trouble still getting around the language of this ordinance, and I understand that it's been drafted based upon other municipal ordinances. I think. No, this is from scratch, an Evanston from scratch ordinance. Mr. Rep? Okay.
But the other ordinances that we're referring to is the Park District Municipal, or I'm sorry, the Park District Municipal Code, which is a state ordinance. So it's not, all other park districts have to follow the same ordinance in terms of the sale or leasing of land. In this one, what we've done is we've taken the language where it basically says city shall acquire other real property or facilities equal or greater in area. We've taken that language out of the state ordinance and placed it into our ordinance. So that portion of it has been taken from another ordinance.
That's language that other park districts
That is
followed.
correct.
But they're not home rule like that.
Right, right.
Alderman Holmes.
Well, first I wanted to just make a couple of things clear in terms of what Ms. Esther referred to, and then I want to get back to the ordinance. In terms of parks for people north of Emerson Street, number one, the family-focused property is actually leased to the city of Evanston where the park is. So the park is really the city of Evanston's park. It's on family-focused land. Mr. Gaynor, you can jump in if I'm wrong. I think you all have a long-time lease on that. So it really is a city park as far as that is concerned. And also just a block and a half north of that is Twiggs Park, which goes from Green Bay and Noyes all the way to Simpson and Bridge Street. So there is parked land. That's all. I just, so we don't have to worry about kids having to cross the street or being without park area in north of Emerson Street. Since there's not a street yet cut on Emerson Street, and I know you're referring to the master plan, that is not a consideration in terms of kids crossing that area now. So I just want to say that, just in case people think that there's no parks over there. We do have some. So I just want to be clear about that. And in terms of the ordinance, I had problems with this from the first that I read it, and I continue to have. I don't support it. I think that the Recreation Board is there to make recommendations to the city now. So I don't know why we would have to have an ordinance to get recommendations from them on whether we wanted to do something with vacant land or parkland. I just think it's unnecessary, and I'm certainly not in support of it.
Okay, I'll say a couple of things. I share, where's Mr. Reff? There you are. I share some of the comments that you made. I understand that when we apply to various sources to be America's most livable city, one of the things they look at is parkland. As you said, in applying for grants, that's very, very important as well. I'm very confused about this because it's asking us to really determine what is parkland. And as Alderman Grover mentioned, I'm not sure we have a good definition for that, especially when it's land that has buildings on it. I think the Harley Clark Mansion is a good example of that. I think that Robert Crown Center could be a good example of that. If we're going to have a private entity come in and run and operate and build Robert Crown Center, then what happens to this? And I think it's unnecessarily confusing and could create some obstacles for us. That said, I can't imagine this council or any future council ever wanting to divest itself of parkland. It's so precious to the community. But I would like to know, when is the last time we divested ourselves of parkland and for what reason? Yes, Mr. Gaynor.
I'll try to respond to that. Some time ago, we owned the Caravelli School. We sold that school, and part of that negotiation, the Caravelli school folks wanted to expand their footprint into Curry Park, which is a park owned by the city. It's on both the north and west side of that building. Part of the negotiation included a cost to Caravelli for the amount of space that they were going to encroach on in order to complete their expansion. It also included a cost to relocate the basketball court that was there, and because of their expansion, it was going to encroach into the basketball court. So in addition to the purchase price of the building, there was an additional cost that the city placed, and that money is now being held by the city. So when the expansion occurs, the amount of money that's being held will be able to make that park whole again. There was another, and I'm not sure if this was what was being referred to, but in the West Side plan, the park that was, I describe it next to the previous Robinson Bus Yard, and Alderman Holmes, maybe you know what I'm.
I know. Yeah.
That park was eliminated in the West Side plan, and I came before the Planning and Development Committee, and I indicated that I thought that was. It had not been replaced. The parkland had not been replaced. There was going to be sort of a promenade or walkway, some parking lots with some greenery around them, but the park was not being replaced.
Park was going to be replaced into the development in that particular scenario.
Well, not until I actually went before Planning and Development, and there was an amendment to the plan. And so those are two examples of when there was a situation that the parkland may have been diminished.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Can I address the comments?
Of course.
Well, first of all, in addition to being a park board member, I'm also a park planner and I have been for 25 years. So I've dealt with a lot of park districts and cities as well that have parks departments. So I've seen a lot of what can happen. And in no way are we suggesting that this council would sell land designated for park use, or would not ask for a recommendation for the Park and Rec Board. I know they would. And the reason we're looking for taking this action as part of an ordinance is down the line, forward thinking, that there may be at some point an occurrence where this could happen, where a city council could divest itself of a piece of property and decide that they don't need to replace it with other park property. So it's kind of looking towards the future. The other thing is regarding your comment on what is parkland, what is park property. As far as I know, it's based on the zoning classification and the ownership. So if the city actually owns a piece of property, it's zoned as park property or open space, that would be part of the language in the ordinance. It says city-owned, and from my understanding, it has to be designated as parkland through the zoning classification.
So would that then mean that the Civic Center, for example, would be, in your definition, considered parkland?
I don't believe this piece of property is zoned as. I don't know if different communities do things differently. If whether we have a classification.
Yeah, I know that.
This is not a park.
Yeah, but what is the zoning?
I don't have that.
I don't know that either. In different communities, either they zone it as whatever their zoning classification is, or they do what's called an overlay district, where it has an underlying zoning, and then the open space zoning is placed over that. So,
I'm just trying to work within your definition to imagine how
the
this
Civic
might.
Center is adjoining, right, in
Oh, I
Orange
know.
Park.
I know.
So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I hear what your question is.
Yeah.
so as far as my understanding, it's owned by the city, and it's zoned through our zoning classifications as parkland.
Okay, folks. Are there any other comments? Did we make a motion on this? I'm not sure we did.
No.
Okay. Would someone just make a motion since we've already had the discussion? Nobody wants to make a motion. Alderman
Not a motion, but I think I'd still like more information about an inventory of those things that would be covered by this ordinance, the park property, city-owned park property. And that will help me, I think, envision how this plays out. Because, for example, Robert Crown, we build a new Robert Crown at Dodge and Main. It swaps. There's no net loss of parkland, presumably. Even with a larger footprint of a new Robert Crown, there's no net loss of parkland, and I understand the principle of not wanting to lose any parkland in Evanston, inadvertently or by design. And so this just provides for a give and take on losing a little, we gain a little bit of parkland somewhere else. It's, again, the language, the actual language of the proposed ordinance and understanding what it applies to that's going to help me here.
Okay.
And I'm looking at, on the city's website, Evanston Parks and Beaches, but I'm not sure that the map actually includes everything that would be, that this ordinance would apply to.
Okay,
92 parks.
So let's hold this in committee for more information. Is that acceptable to everyone? Yeah. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Raffel. All right, we're going on to item H4, Proposed Ordinance 81011, amending Title IX, Chapter 4 of the Evanston Municipal Code entitled Dogs, Cats, Animals, and Fowl to regulate problem pet owners. This was something I asked to come to committee. This is, again, continuing the discussion about that was raised when we amended the dangerous dog ordinance. This is looking to insert wording into our regulations that will address citizens who routinely do not follow the code, follow the law regarding their pets. And it defines a problem pet owner in two circumstances in which a hearing officer could find the pet owner liable. It also gives the police department and the police chief some additional latitude to confiscate animals for the protection of the animals. And addresses the ramifications of the designation as a problem pet owner, and that the designation should be quoted in the notice of citation to the pet owner under subsection C. Has everyone had a chance to read this and consider it? Okay, then could I have a motion?
I would move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, then discussion. Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk, and thank you for bringing this to us as a follow-up to the dangerous dog ordinance. I kind of want to call this ordinance the ordinance for responsible pet ownership.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of focusing on the negative, say what we really want to encourage is responsible pet ownership. Do other municipalities use problem pet owner as the phraseology?
Yes.
Because I couldn't figure out if it was the pet was the problem or the owner was.
No, in this case, it's the owner who's the problem.
It's the problem owner of a pet.
Right, that's correct.
Yes.
And this was actually modeled on the Highland Park ordinance.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Well, maybe we could change the title, Alderman Grover. You could just make an amendment to change it. Why not?
Like it? No?
Yeah.
All right. So I would amend the ordinance to be amending Title IX, Chapter 4 of the Evanston Municipal Code, entitled Dogs, Cats, Animals, and Fowl to, what did I say before?
To add a new section.
Responsible pet ownership.
For responsible pet ownership.
Is there a second to that?
I would second.
I'll second.
Okay.
I like that.
Yes, I like that too. Any other discussion on this? Alderman Tendam.
Actually, I would like to know if this does go far enough in terms of the citations that we make, if this is really, I don't know if the chief has weighed in on this, but would certainly be interested to know of his point of view if we are addressing some of those issues that were brought up during the previous ordinance of the dangerous dog, and how the police really could use more tools at their disposal to collect or to enforce the citations.
Right. Well, the chief's coming to the microphone. I believe he said last time that this is a void in our ordinance. It's not covered at all, so it's a good first step, I think. Chief, what do you think?
What she said. No.
Oh.
Good evening, members of the committee. Yes, this gives us some additional tools to call to task the owners who are really at issue. I think we've touched on a couple of non-payment, other issues that were people that don't responsibly care for or control their pets create an issue in the community, and I think this gives us some more tools to address those issues.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, all right. Are there any other comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Well, thank you. That was quick. Yeah, we're not done. We're not done. No.
She made an amendment.
Right.
It was not approved.
Oh, all right. So we need to vote on Alderman Grover's amendment. Yes, on this. Yes, the name change to an ordinance for responsible pet ownership. Okay. Okay. It is.
She doesn't like it.
She doesn't like it.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kathy Aganis from the Law Department. Just briefly, I understand the committee's desire to amend the title of the ordinance. Does the committee have any guidance as to how that amendment should be carried out throughout the ordinance itself if the amendment is to pass? For example, if you look down on your page, the main operative provision of the ordinance is to designate a person as a problem pet owner.
Right. I think we just define problem pet owner and then have it continue on through the ordinance.
So it's
this
solely
is just
a change to the
yeah.
title, then? Is that what
right.
I'm understanding? Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. All in favor of Alderman Grover's amendment? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So items for discussion. An update on citizen review of police complaints that was in your packet. Is there any discussion on that? Chief, did you have anything you wanted to say on that? No. Just here to answer questions? Yes. Okay. No one has questions on that? Okay. And then communications. Mr. Gaynor, I will turn that over to you. Oh, here we go. There's a request for information.
That's the chief.
Oh, chief?
Officer of Property Professional Standards.
Okay. You have a request for information memo from OPS?
Just a communication.
That's just communication?
Just a communication.
Did you want to say anything about that?
There was a question raised by Betty Esther regarding the information we collect as identifiers for people filing complaints. Based on her inquiry, we conducted a review of all complaints we've taken in, and all the complaints have been investigated whether or not people provided us with information. I went on further to highlight in my response to her that a sizable number of the individuals lodging complaints with the police department are already known to us because the complaint stems out of an arrest or interaction where we already have the information. So whether or not we take it at the time or we already have it or the complainant refuses to provide it, the complaint is still investigated.
Anyone have any questions for the chief? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, second. Okay, thank you very much. Our next meeting is, when is our next meeting? Monday, December 5th, 2011 at 7:30 p.m. I'm sorry, Ms. Esther?
Thank you. The chief did explain the memo that the request for that was sent and why we sent it. We did send him a letter on August the 10th, which you do have, and where we questioned the new complaint form that was amended on December the 1st, 2010. That was amended to add, and I couldn't figure out what, because in looking at his complaint package, it had been amended in 2004 with that information on it. But that information, most of the people that had filed complaints from 2004 forward say they never did put in that. But I did talk to one person, say, well, when I got there to file it at the police department, I had to fill it out and give that information, because if you look at those complaints forms that he put in your package, you look down to see when it's revised. It's 2004. He did blacken it out for privacy. When the state does not require an affidavit to ask you for your birthday or your driver's license number, nowhere, there's only 2 places that I could find that asked for that information. And both of them was in the state of Texas. And we're the only other state people that is asking for their driver's license. And with the chief's statement that says that people don't mind giving it that, and those people that don't mind giving it, they're already in the complaint. I'll read you what it says. I assure you, should an individual complaint express concern about providing this data, we will accommodate his concern by investigating the complaint. The person has to make another complaint about he don't want to provide this information for his complaint to get investigated. So now he got 2 complaints. That doesn't make any sense. There is no need for it. The state does not require it. Nobody requires it in an affidavit. All it says that you have to have it notarized and sworn that this is an affidavit, and you swear that it to be the truth if you file it. It didn't say provide us with your driver's license and your date of birth.
Thank you, Ms. Esther.
So I think it needs to be changed, and you should change it. Thank you.